Get started. Hello, marhaba. On behalf of my colleagues at the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, also known as SIMS, I'm delighted to welcome everyone to this virtual visit to the Lawrence J. Schoenberg Collection, focusing specifically on our Islamicate manuscripts. My name is Lynn Ransom, and I am the Curator of Programs here at SIMS. I'm here also in my capacity as a recently elected member of the Board of Directors of the Islamic Manuscript Society. It's both an honor and a privilege to represent the Islamic Manuscript Society, and I am grateful for the membership's confidence in my ability to serve on the board. I'm also especially grateful to Dalia Al-Nasher for inviting us to present and for organizing the virtual visit series, which promises to be a great opportunity for the association to learn more about each other's collections and to share our collective knowledge. I'd also like to take a moment to thank and acknowledge the work of the translators on this Zoom meeting, Professor Nehal Mohammed, Nouran Tarak, and Mr. Ahmed Nasira. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Nicholas Herman, who I think you can see on the screen. Nick is the Lawrence J. Schoenberg Curator of Manuscripts here at Penn Libraries. Nick will lead us through the collection, first with an overview of our Islamicate manuscripts, followed by virtual viewings of a selection of some of our highlights. At this point, we would invite you to post questions or comments. I would like to say a few words about the Schoenberg Institute. Some of you may not be familiar with our work, and to alert you to some of our upcoming events. The Schoenberg Institute is a unit of the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. Since its founding in 2013, the mission of SIMS has been to bring manuscript culture, modern technology, and people together to bring access to and understanding of our shared intellectual heritage. We like to think of ourselves as both a think tank and a resource for the study of pre-modern manuscripts in the digital age. To that end, we aim to make our collections, programs, and data available to scholars and students around the world. We invite scholars at all levels to use and contribute to projects such as the Schoenberg Database of Manuscripts, or VizCall, an online collation tool, or to freely use manuscript data available in OPEN, fully open access repository of metadata and images. You can find out more about these and other projects by visiting our website that I'm showing you here at schoenberginstitute.org. In addition to making data available to the world, we also seek to bring scholars to Penn to study our manuscripts through a series of programs, including a visiting research fellowship that brings up to 3 scholars a year to campus for a month to research our manuscript and digital collections. We will be opening a call for that program next spring, and more information regarding the program and past fellows can be found on our website. We also host the annual Schoenberg Symposium on Manuscript Studies in the Digital Age. Now in its 15th year, the symposium brings together scholars at all levels to present research on a specific topic. So our topic this year is Translating Science, and it will be held November 10th through the 12th. This topic considers the networks of exchange, transmission, and translation of natural knowledge evident in manuscript culture in the pre and early modern periods. And we've invited this year 14 speakers to present papers on subjects ranging from pharmacology to medicine, alchemy to technology, among several other topics. The symposium will be held online as well as in person, and registration is currently open. So I invite you to visit the website and to sign up. We will also be recording the event, and those recordings will be made available on our YouTube channel. In addition to these programs, we also publish a biannual journal called Manuscript Studies, which aims to embrace the full complexity of global manuscript studies through both traditional and digital scholarship. You are seeing a sneak preview of the cover of our next issue, which will be coming out later in October. We are actively seeking submissions for the fall 2023 and beyond. And if you're interested in submitting, please feel free to contact us at any time. Again, to learn more about all of our programs and events, please visit our website and you'll find all the information that you need there. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter on the website, which alerts you to upcoming events and other news on a more regular basis. While our programs are key to our mission, at the heart of everything we do is the Schoenberg Collection of Manuscripts. The collection includes nearly 300 manuscripts and documents ranging in date from circa 1900 BC to the 20th century. And it was the vision of Larry Schoenberg, as well as his wife, Barbara Bristol Schoenberg, to build a collection that documented the transmission of knowledge from ancient times to the present. With its emphasis on the history of science and the transmission of knowledge across time and geography, the Schoenberg Collection brings together many of the great scientific and philosophical traditions of the ancient and medieval worlds, and underscores the complex networks of science and society that form the foundations of our intellectual heritage. As I mentioned earlier, we encourage students and scholars at all stages to visit and engage with our collections, whether virtually or in person. I hope this initial visit will pique your interest in our Islamicate manuscripts and encourage you to reach out to us at any time after this visit to learn more about our programs and collection. Thank you again for coming, and I look forward to future exchanges. I'll now hand things over to my colleague, Nick Herman. Nick, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Lynn, for the introduction. And as you mentioned, we'll be exploring highlights from our collection of Islamicate manuscripts in the Schoenberg collection. And I'm going to give a little overview of the collection and how the Arabic and also some Persian manuscripts fit into the collection. But I should preface this by saying that I'm not a specialist in Islamic manuscripts. I can't read Arabic or Persian. And so I'm relying on a lot of work done by colleagues in cataloging these wonderful manuscripts. And I'll just spend a few moments talking about that before we begin an overview of the items we'll be looking at, and then before we dive into actually live handling of the manuscripts. So it's important to realize that the manuscripts from Lawrence J. Schoenberg collection from the Muslim world are a part of a much larger ensemble of manuscripts from Islamicate manuscripts in the Philadelphia region, and that we've recently completed at the Schoenberg Institute with some partner institutions around the region of Philadelphia and also Columbia University in New York. We completed a large digitization and especially cataloging project that was funded by the Council on Library and Information Resources from a grant from them. And this was a partnership that involved, as I said, some digitization, but especially cataloging of collections in the region. And as you can see, the Columbia and the University of Pennsylvania have large collections of Islamic manuscripts. The Schoenberg collection manuscripts are a subset of the University of Pennsylvania holdings. And then we also have wonderful manuscript collections of the Free Library of Philadelphia and of other institutions for higher education, other libraries in the region. So all of these items are fully digitized, available online in JPEG, but also in TIFF format, entirely open access. And so they can be used for publications, for research, for teaching, over 216,000 images. And these digitized manuscripts are also placed in other repositories. Open, which I just showed you on the previous screen, is our homegrown digital repository at the University of Pennsylvania. But other institutions, notably Columbia University, have their own repositories, as well as the Internet Archive. So the intention is to have these digital facsimiles of manuscripts available long-term and in open access. It's very important to thank, I can't mention all the many people involved, many specialists and many linguistic experts involved in cataloging this large variety of manuscripts, but I should draw attention to our former colleague, Dr. Kelly Tuttle, who has great expertise in Arabic and in other languages as well, and was instrumental in cataloging these manuscripts. So beyond the digitization, of course, cataloging is so important. Many of these items were poorly cataloged or barely cataloged at all. And so linking names to name authorities, linking author names and owners to name authorities, very important work. And even just identifying texts. And this is a slide that my colleague Mitch Frost, who's also a curator here at the Kislak Center at Penn, was very involved in this project. He put this slide together to show how the cataloging was really transformed with the manuscripts from the Muslim World Project. This is a manuscript example of something that was not in the Lawrence J. Schoenberg collection. The Schoenberg manuscripts were somewhat better cataloged to begin with. But you can see that this was a manuscript C kept in a beige shoebox. This was in our collections at Penn, Quran, Arabic, Naskh writing, and a few other details. And you see on the right, this is our catalog record for this manuscript. This is UPenn MS Codex 41. So a manuscript from our collection, but I won't show it to you today. It's not from the Schoenberg collection. It was acquired earlier by University of Pennsylvania. And you can see the cataloging is transformed. There's much more detail, a huge amount of metadata, dates, names, etc., transliterated into English, but also in Arabic. So very important for discoverability, findability of these manuscripts by researchers. And I should just mention as well that there have been a couple of exhibitions that have really come out of the Manuscripts of the Muslim World initiative, two very different exhibitions, one last summer at the Free Library of Philadelphia in the Path of Islam. So an exhibition that looked at some of the manuscripts in the collections of the Free Library of Philadelphia. So that is Philadelphia's public library, but also engaged with contemporary communities, heritage communities in Philadelphia to kind of ask them to tell us what their responses are to these manuscripts from the Muslim world in the collection of the Free Library. On the left, a poster for an exhibition that's about to open, a small exhibition at Columbia University, again based on some of the research done for the Manuscripts of the Muslim World Project. In terms of manuscripts from the Lawrence J. Schoenberg collection, we have about 50 manuscripts that are in Arabic or in Persian, and out of about 300 in the Schoenberg collection. So this is aside from Latin, this is the second largest kind of linguistic and cultural grouping in the collection. The majority of the other manuscripts are from medieval and early modern Europe, but a very strong cluster of manuscripts in Arabic especially. And the catalog of Lawrence J. Schoenberg's collection that Lynn showed you the cover of, this was published in 2006 before the manuscripts were donated to the University of Pennsylvania. Transformation of Knowledge, that was the name of the catalog. It organized the collection into 10 categories, and already organizing such a diverse collection is a bit of a feat. And so I'm going to sort of follow this categorization and show you some highlights from each of these sections, except number 10, legal documents and charters. There are no items in the collection in Arabic that really are of that nature. But we have very strong clusters, as you can see, in mathematics, astronomy, astrology, and the calendar, and medicine. And so I'm going to be showing you first some slides and then live some of the highlights of these parts of the collection. So I've used the organization in that catalog from 2006 to help guide us through. So a large part of the Schoenberg collection is sort of related to the theme of responses to Aristotle. So how thought from Aristotle, from ancient Greece, is transmitted through time and space, translated into Arabic, and then often back into Latin or back into European languages. And I'd like to start with this item, which is really, in terms of its early date, quite remarkable in our collections. And so this is the Secret of Secrets, which is its name, its conventional name in English. And it was very, very popular text in Arabic, but also in the Middle Ages in Europe, translated into Latin and other and other vernacular languages. And this is a pseudo-epigraphic letter, right? So it's a legendary letter. We don't know the true author. That's why it's pseudo-Aristotle, but it's presented as a letter from Aristotle to Alexander the Great. And it's a fairly long text that goes into detail about statecraft, astronomy, astrology, magic, and medicine. And so it's really a guide to rulership. And that might explain why it's popular both in the Islamic world and in the Latin West throughout the Middle Ages. And so this is a copy probably from Mosul around 1200 CE. And I'm going to see if I can actually switch to the camera, which I hope you can all see. And the manuscript has a frontispiece, which has the name and titles of the Turkmen ruler of Mosul, so Nur al-Din Arslan Shah, and then the Bismillah here, the secondary title in blue and ink outlined in red. And this item is mostly text, but I'll show you as well. It has some interesting illustrations, this octagonal diagram towards the end. Geometric illustration. And a list of symbols and characters in other languages as well. So that is the secret of secrets, the Sir al-Asrar. And I'm going to switch back now to my slides. I hope this isn't too much switching around. A second important part of the collection, the Schoenberg collection, is devoted to music. And that's music in the sort of larger pre-modern sense, meaning music as a branch of philosophy in the Western world as a part of the 7 liberal arts. But so music as a kind of mathematical exercise as well, the mathematical branch of knowledge. And of course, in the Islamic world, as in the Latin West, much musical theory is derived from ancient Greek theories on music and Boethius as well. And so here we have an example of slightly later, so this is a 16th century treatise on music that's accompanied with diagrams that show various ratios, divisions of frets, ratios of intervals, consonants, dissonance, and the mathematical and geometrical formulas that convey this. Just switch to the overhead camera. So this is the Kitab al-Adwar fi al-Musica. I apologize for my no doubt terrible pronunciation. But this is a treatise on the theory of music. So it's, I believe its author was a 13th century theorist of music, Urmawi Abd al Mumin ibn Yusuf, so 13th century author, and this is a 16th century copy of the text on paper. And you can see that it has the various musical intervals. And what's interesting is that we have a roughly contemporary manuscript in Latin, but written in France around the year 1500, that is also a rendition of Boethius's treatise on music that has very similar diagrams. And so a lot of the interest of the Schoenberg collection is in the cross-cultural comparisons and really the commonalities between knowledge production and knowledge transmission in the Islamic-speaking lands and in the Latin West, or in Christian Europe. And so I think that's a part of Lawrence Schoenberg's sort of collecting drive, was to show actually some of the commonalities and the interconnectivity of knowledge. And of course, there are also a significant number of Hebrew manuscripts in the collection as well, which are also part of this, of course, very well-known now and well-studied interconnection of languages and cultures that led to the transmission of knowledge. Of course, practical knowledge, which is really what Larry Schoenberg was interested in, does not, is simply practical and doesn't necessarily need to have linguistic barriers. I mean, it's useful. It can be interesting in every language. And diagrams are really one of the focuses of the collection as well. So the way that knowledge is transmitted, not just through text, but sometimes complex knowledge, of course, can't be transmitted adequately through text. And so diagrams are necessary. And we, in our collection, have representations of most of the major types of diagrams. And this has an ownership stamp that has not yet been identified. Kelly and others worked very hard to identify some of the ownership marks in some of these manuscripts, earlier ownership marks, and it's not always very easy. But of course, all of this material is fully digitized online, and we will post links to the digitized versions of everything when we're done. And so if anyone has any expertise or knows other experts who may be able to help identify some of these ownership marks in order to kind of add to the provenance information of some of these manuscripts, that would be very, very welcome. So that's LJS manuscript 235. All of our manuscripts from the Schoenberg collection have a LJS number. That's just the sequence in Larry Schoenberg's collection. This was LJS 235. The first manuscript I showed you, The Secret of Secrets, was LJS 459. And of course, we will have a full list for you pasted into the chat, I think, at the end of the session. All right, I'm going to move back to my slides, and I hope that's okay, going back and forth. So moving into mathematics, another strong area of the Schoenberg collection. We have many manuscripts in Arabic, in Latin, that relate to Euclid, so Euclid's Elements, so this fundamental text from antiquity about geometry. And here we have an early version, early 12th century CE copy. It's not precisely localized, but Egypt, Iraq, or Syria. It's profusely illustrated with diagrams. So I'll show you a little bit of that as well, if you can see the overhead camera. Now, this manuscript is a little bit small and a little bit difficult to handle, so I'm just going to carefully page through it. This is LJS 37. It's a epitome or an abridgment of Euclid's text. the transliterated title is Ikhtisar lil Maqalat min Kitab Euclidis, so this abridgment or epitome of Euclid. It's on paper, and there's a replacement title page, and in fact, the first 6 pages I think are replacement pages here. So you can see that the text is not continuous, and these replacement pages incorrectly give the title as the complete edition of Euclid, which usually refers to the version, kind of famous version in Arabic edited by Al-Tusi, of which this is not. So this is a different version, again, Euclid's text was really primary. You can see that this has been used. This is a later annotator who's done their own diagram to try to work out some geometrical problem or question. And you can see that the text is full of, starting with simple triangles and moving on to more complex forms, is very profusely illustrated with these inline diagrams for the most part, right, that are planned as the text, planned and penned, presumably by the scribe, in red as the text is being written. So moving from simpler shapes towards more complex ones. So another very early item from our collection, very prized item. And it is LJS 37, that's its shelf mark, as I mentioned, but it also is accompanied by another, oops, I'll just move back to the camera here. There we go, thank you. It's accompanied by another quire of leaves from the same manuscript. So the manuscript is fragmentary, and I think this was acquired separately by Larry Schoenberg. Whoops. So as things were becoming available on the antiquarian book market, as Larry Schoenberg was collecting, he noticed that this item, there was another item from this same volume, another gathering, and so acquired it. So this is housed together as LJS 460 with LJS 37. So moving from mathematics to a related branch of knowledge, astronomy, astrology, and the calendar, another major focus of the collection. Of course, time and the movements of the planets are, in a sense, universal. I mean, all humans are exposed to these natural, inevitable forces. And so much of the Schoenberg collection is, or a significant portion of it is devoted to pre-Copernican or pre-Galilean notions of astronomy and astrology as well. Of course, branches of knowledge that today we regard as pseudoscience, astrology, but of course, in pre-modern eras were very much considered a science and associated with astronomy and observational astronomy. So I'm going to get the next item here that I'm showing you slides of, but I think it's always more interesting to then look at the original. Thank you, Lynn, for handling this switching between these the spotlight. I know it's a little bit complicated. This is another wonderful item from the very end of the Timurid period. This is dated. It has a in geographical illustrations and diagrams, and half of a horoscope diagram for a location in northern Afghanistan dated 12th March 1507 CE. So it's a fragment of a larger work, beautifully illustrated, even though it's fragmentary. And it begins with, and of course, this is Persian language manuscript, and it begins with half of a world map that has some shell gold gilding, right? So a painted gold for the seas, and this wonderful green for the, I guess, the beyond the sphere of the Earth. So half of a world map only, because this is a fragmentary item, and I don't think the other portions of this manuscript are known, although that I may be wrong, and there may be discoveries to be made there or links to be made with other manuscripts. Okay, so the world map, and then here we have a table with the here the arrangement of the climactic zones. No, wait a minute, that is here. Right, the arrangement of the 7 climactic zones. And then here we have the geographical relationship of various cities to Mecca on folio 3 recto. And then on 4 verso, we have the rainbow predictions, very interesting. And then the setting and rising of the moon, of course, divided into the 30 sections, 30 sort of quadrants. And then this is half of a double-page horoscope diagram. So the remainder, of course, is missing because this is just a fragment. So a Persian text from 1507 CE, from sort of end of the Timurid Empire in Eastern Persia, modern day Iran. All right, so of course that Ptolemaic system of the geocentric universe is widely commented, widely discussed in texts in Arabic, and also in the Latin world. We have a number of manuscripts, Islamic manuscripts, that contain either the text of the Almagest or commentaries upon it. And so this is a portion of the Almagest that I'm going to show you that is written in Saragossa, so in Spain, 1381 CE. So again, attesting to the sort of multilingual and multicultural environment of late medieval Spain, where the copyist of this particular manuscript was an astronomer to Pedro IV of Aragon. I'm just going to move the camera slightly so that we can zoom out a little bit. So just bear with me, please. There we go. This is LJS 268. Ownership notes and some prefatory material. It is a manuscript on paper. It's been restored several times. You can see in the margins. It's been encapsulated in strips of paper, presumably in relatively modern times. And it contains, it's an extensive treatise on Aristotelian astronomy, considers the motion of the stars and the planets in a spherical geocentric universe. To show you, it's a very lengthy text, but I'll show you some of these illustrations or some of these diagrams. Just to give you a sense of the extent of the work. So this is a much lengthier text than, for example, the Euclid abridgment that I showed you earlier. That's for the pocket-sized reference guide. This is a much larger item, as you can see. And I believe the paper is watermarked, and it's Italian paper, Venetian paper, which is not that unusual for this period. All right. I realize I'm going somewhat quickly, but I do want to be able to show a little bit of everything, and I'm mindful of our time here. So I will move on but continue on the theme of astronomy, astrology, and the calendar. So moving from versions of the Almagest translated into Arabic to a really wonderful item, a treatise on the astrolabe, and which is of course a prototypical invention, a device of Islamic science, and this item is produced in the 13th century CE, and LJS 478. And so a text on instructions for using and actually making an astrolabe, which is really fascinating. It's actually a collection of treatises, and there are different types of instruments that are described in each of these treatises. So the main text on the astrolabe by Biruni, Muhammad ibn Abad Biruni, so 11th century author, and their short works on different types of astrolabes. So a crab and drum astrolabe, then a treatise on other instruments, including one for finding the direction to Mecca, treatises on the compass, on the ecliptic. So sort of technical tome, which is very interesting. And you'll see that there are some interesting diagrams that sort of demonstrate how the components of the astrolabe work. And we have other texts, much later texts. We have a text in Italian on the astrolabe from around 1500. So again, the collection allows us to trace the transmission of concrete scientific instruments and navigational instruments like the astrolabe. And so here you can see the various components that are sort of broken down into diagrams. And there's even, I don't know if you saw on the inside cover, an early binding, we have a sort of, must be a compass sort of test. Someone's tested out, or maybe is making notes based on what they're learning from this manuscript. So the first 66 folios are this primary text on the astrolabe, and then the shorter texts are folios 66 to to 86 are the additional treatises on these other types of instruments and other variants on the astrolabe. Again, here the different components. I'm not an authority on how the astrolabe functions, but I think one can recognize these different instruments and portions, the kind of mechanical, free-moving portions of an astrolabe, which are very carefully drawn out and illustrated in an interesting way, where you can see that there's clearly the use of compasses and rulers for the straight lines, and then the kind of portions that are more intricate. I hope you can see from the camera that they're a bit more shaky. I mean, all of the lines that are not, they can't be drawn with a ruler or with some kind of template or a compass are obviously drawn by hand. And so the pointers that indicate the various readings on the astrolabe are all drawn by hand. And I hope you could see that as an interesting contrast. I mean, it's all done by the same person at the same time, but that tension between the kind of perfect forms of the ruler and compass and the sort of freehand elements. And just to say, I mean, as you can probably tell from my quite hesitant descriptions of these various diagrams, we don't have, as it stands, we don't have page level metadata. We don't have descriptions of what each of these diagrams do. And so this is obviously knowledge that specialists might have. And so, we encourage anyone, anywhere in the world really to use our digitized manuscripts or to come visit us in Philadelphia and to see these items firsthand and to do projects on them, to have students work on them. And some of that sort of descriptive metadata that would describe what each of the diagrams is doing would be very useful to us. And we don't have that even for some of our Latin or European vernacular manuscripts with diagrams, because some of these diagrams are very complex and of course difficult to understand for non-specialists even today. So we encourage you to make use of our resources, to work on projects related to these manuscripts, or to have students work on projects related to these manuscripts. And we always welcome feedback via our web catalog. You can also write to us directly if there are any errors or omissions that you find in our records online. And again, because the geographical and linguistic and chronological spread of the Schoenberg collection is so vast, it's difficult for any of us to really master a certain area or master all of it, or have an understanding of how all of these various manuscript traditions work. So again, the profusion of diagrams, and we're getting towards the final portion of the text that has those shorter treatises on the crab astrolabe and on drum astrolabe. When the indicator is turned into a sort of face of a animal, of a horse. Okay, let's see, that's a little difficult to see, but and again, some ownership stamps that I don't think are yet identified. So again, if anyone has a specific expertise and is interested in helping us identify those in order to know more about the provenance of some of these items, that would be wonderful. I think they are the presence of stamps is mentioned in our catalog, and Kelly Tuttle did a lot of work, even just identifying that stamps are present. And so those can be searched in our catalog. And if any of those, if anyone can help identify those, that would be wonderful. All right, moving on to medicine. We have also a large collection of manuscripts devoted to medicine, and particularly to Avicenna, and translations, well, Avicenna in, of course, in Arabic, but also translations into European languages, commentaries on Avicenna. We have a very good concentration of items on those, on Avicenna and that tradition. I'm not going to show you any of those today because they don't have diagrams. They're mainly textual manuscripts, so there's less to show live on screen. But I do want to show you this amazing anatomical treatise in Arabic and Persian that has these extraordinary anatomical diagrams of the human body. So I'll just fetch that one moment, please. So this is LJS 49. Again, it's a Arabic and Persian treatise on anatomy that is written in the hands of probably in the hand of the author. It's a text originally written in 1396 CE, but this is a copy that is dated to AH 813, so 1411 CE, and it's an anatomy treatise with chapters on bones, nerves, veins, arteries and muscles, and complex organs. And again, this is a manuscript on paper that's been restored a little bit here around the edges. And it has these amazing diagrams that I want to show you that are some of the highlights of our collection. Certainly students, just because of the visual, the kind of extraordinary visual aspect of these diagrams. But of course, these are not meant primarily as works of art. They're meant as instructional diagrams that convey information that is difficult for text to convey. So here we have a diagram of bones, all labeled, and you can see it's a sort of skeleton-like depiction with these sort of gilded, almost horseshoe shapes, which represent the ribs. Another aspect of the Schoenberg collection that we really pride ourselves on is that for a modern kind of comprehensive teaching and research university, we have items that speak to the history of most disciplines that are taught at the university. So in this case, medicine, but as you've seen already, astronomy, statecraft, or political science, you could say, geometry, mathematics, and also we have items related to commerce, to business, and to many other topics. So we really pride ourselves on being able to show members of the university community, students, or faculty items that relate to their area of interest, even if it's from beyond the humanities, beyond the humanistic disciplines that are usually associated with historical manuscript, the study of historical manuscripts. So we have then a diagram of the nervous system. Veins here, and the digestive system, obviously, with the heart here. Here are the major arteries, so from veins to the sort of major arteries. And then a little bit damaged, but I hope you can see it. Here we have complex organs, including the uterus with a fetus in it that has been damaged and rubbed repeatedly, but quite a remarkable depiction. and with the use of coloring, it's a little bit difficult, I think, for you to see on screen. But this is the reproductive and the digestive organs are in quite a strong shade of yellow that sort of doesn't come through on screen, I can see, but so a unique treatise on anatomy, illustrated with these diagrams, probably a author-made copy, but of a text that he had originally written some decades before. I'll show some of these again because these are really extraordinary. All right. Now, alchemy, of course, what we would consider today totally pseudoscientific, huge branch of knowledge in pre-modern societies in the kind of wider Mediterranean world, in the Islamic world, in Latin Christian world, and of course with the shared goal, in a way, of turning base elements, base metals into gold, right? And that is, of course, another endeavor that's sort of cross-cultural, and that everybody wants gold. And I think this is one of the reasons why alchemy is so present also in the Schoenberg collection, because again, the desire to show the kind of interconnectivity and shared goals of the different intellectual traditions within the Mediterranean world. So here we have two brief alchemical works. This manuscript is undated, and fairly little is known about it. It's this very small sort of booklet, and I think it was redated by Kelly Tuttle based on paleography and codicology. It was dated a little bit later, so it's thought to be early modern, so 16th, 17th, maybe even 18th century, and written by two treatises that appear to be written by a father for his son. And they're encoded alphabets, and there's a key to deciphering the encoded alphabets here, which is very nice. And this little kind of booklet is interesting because on its final verso, again, there's an ownership stamp that's not identified, but there's an interesting red and black ink drawing of laboratory equipment, including a mortar and pestle here, a furnace, the mortar and pestle, right? The little crescent, that's actually a cutaway, a section of a mortar, of a pestle, and then the mortar, right? So instrument used to grind up substances, glass vessels, and then a furnace here for distillation. So a little diagram, it's annotated, difficult to see on the camera, I think, but annotated in red, in Arabic, the various substances and the various names of these different, we would call them beakers, probably in a modern Western sort of scientific chemistry class. But in this case, for alchemical purposes, to try to transform elements into things that are more valuable. And so that is LJS 409. Along with alchemy, and again, these are the divisions that are used in the transformation of knowledge catalog that Lynn showed you at the beginning. Technology. So, of course, many of the other items I've been showing you can be subsumed into this category of technology. But one of the things that one of the items that is really wonderful in the collection is a treatise on measurements and weights, and you can see from these slides balances and scales. Of course, these precision instruments need to be created with a lot of care and to make sure that they are reliable. That the weights and measures can be, to some extent standardized and measured in a reliable way. And so we have LJS 386, which is it's a fragmentary item, and I'll just get it. It's a little bit fragile. As you can see, many of the pages are loose. Thank you, Lynn, for continuing to do such a good job with changing the camera over. But as you can see, this is kept in a slipcase because it's basically disbound. I will just add a little bit more support there. This is, so as I said, it's a treatise on instruments for measuring weight, and it's perhaps mid 13th century CE to mid 14th century CE, so it's undated. We know that the author is a 12th century author, Abd al-Rahman Kazini. So a text written 1 or 2 centuries after, or a copy of a text from 1 or 2 centuries after its composition. And it has a historical introduction to theories of gravity and weighing in Greek and Arabic science. And then it has tables of densities of different substances, including metals, precious stones, solids, and liquids. Very wide-ranging treatise that's very aware of different historical theories and related to the measurement of weights. And turn to some of the more fascinating illustrations of scales and balances, again, in precision instruments. What's interesting as well is, of course, we have in museums around the world and science museums, we have surviving astrolabes, we have surviving scales, balances, weights, and measures produced in the Islamic world, and often copied by European instrument makers as well. And so it's interesting to have the sort of textual foundations of that history of producing precision instruments in the Middle Ages, in the Islamic world, and also in Europe. So some of the sort of texts that kind of underlie some of those prototypical astrolabes and weights and measures and other instruments that one finds in science museums and history museums around the world. So here we have some of the illustrations of weights. And of course, again, I have no expertise in pre-modern weights and measures or in scales, but these are quite sort of, it's quite self-evident how some of these work with the fulcrum and with movable weights, movable arms and portions of the scale. And you can see there's a lot of detail that one can go into. This is one of the pages I had shown in the slide. And I can, I think, very carefully, because it's loose, lift it up and show you this amazing diagram, a very complex scale with different notches that can be set to, I guess, different equivalencies for measuring different ratios. Because of the nature of manuscripts in the Islamic world that are often on paper, of course, after, say, the 12th century, there is often later restoration or rebinding, but quite often we have items that are, of course, loose and largely disbound, like this one. And so we would rarely make the decision to intervene and rebind an item like this or restore it fully unless there's a real urgent conservation need. So for these items, we simply use them very carefully, and these are we supervise their use by researchers or by students a little bit more closely than some of the codices manuscripts on parchment that have somewhat more robust bindings. So moving ahead, I have a few more items to show you, but I think we'll get through everything by 11:30 in the 90-minute period we have. I wanted to be able to illustrate all the categories from the transformation of knowledge. So I do have an item related to animal husbandry. So this is, we have really the only item in Arabic in the collection that's related to this theme. We have many more items in European vernacular languages related to agriculture and animal husbandry. But of course, a very important aspect of the pre-modern world, largely an agrarian world. And so this is an interesting manuscript that is localized to North Africa, so perhaps present-day Morocco. And it's work on astronomical observations used to predict weather patterns. And obviously this has a huge level of importance for farming, for crops, for animal husbandry, when to sow, when are the best times to sow or harvest. And of course, these observations are often, they combine astronomy with astrology, right? When it is an auspicious time to sow and to harvest. So this is a manuscript, again, it's undated, though localized to, to North Africa. Again, it's a more, it's less lavish, it's a less carefully written item. It's fairly modest materially, it's on paper, doesn't have any diagrams, of course, it's just instructions for that practical, very practical, subject of when it is best to sow and to harvest. The watermark, I don't think it's been identified, but it's a bunch of grapes. So that's a watermark that one could presumably look up in one of the various databases and try to determine where the paper was produced. But I think this is an interesting item simply because it shows, and of course there's annotations that show its use over time, but it shows, the presence and the importance of manuscript texts, of written texts, even in sort of perhaps more rural settings or settings that are more agrarian. So we're not just talking about things written in Mosul or Herat or Baghdad or Cairo, but also items that have more agricultural focus. I'll just go back to my slides here for a minute. And this is a really wonderful item. It's a little bit later in date. It is from Aleppo, 1710 CE. And it is a fragment, though quite a substantial fragment, of a wonderful sort of encyclopedic work with illustrations of domestic and wild animals, birds, insects, marine animals, but also plants, a lot of plants and herbs. And so I will just, and this is, of course, based on long traditions, sort of encyclopedic traditions for the herbal, Dioscurides, and for some of the animals, Galen, Ibn al-Baitar, this is a sort of compilation of texts, but it's interesting that it's a manuscript text, again, from the early 18th century CE. It's quite large, so I'm going to just shift the camera to be able to show this to you in its entirety. So please just bear with me. Okay. again, so this is LJS 447. It is a descriptions and illustrations of animals, insects, birds, plants, all kinds of plants and herbs. And again, early 18th century CE, and written, we have the name of the author by Jibrail ibn Mikhail al-Hamawi, known as Ibn Lubad. And I believe that that name is, it's written on the final folio. Here we have also, this is looks like a 20th century description by a bookseller description, perhaps. And like all the items from the Schoenberg collection I've been showing you, they have the LJS book plate that Larry Schoenberg affixed to these items. So this is just a wonderful text in terms of its illustrations. It has over 500 illustrations in line with the text that are done with sort of ink washes. And I'll just go through these very slowly. Right, so they begin with domestic animals. And move to sort of more exotic animal types. And again, the commonalities with what we would call in the Latin the Latin world a bestiary, are very, very close. I mean, with rubrics, rubrications, text in red indicating the subject, in this case, the animal, and these inline diagrams or illustrations. Here done without any frames, so they're just inset into these squares. This, the title of this work is sort of interesting, and I think this has been, the title has been derived from other copies of this work, The Voyages of the Eyes in the Kingdoms of the Main Cities. And in the Schoenberg collection, this is included under the heading Organization of Knowledge. Again, one of the sort of overarching themes of the collection, but really, has a number of manuscripts that are encyclopedic in nature that speak to that desire to organize knowledge in many different cultures and societies. And one can see the appeal also even in the, in the 18th century, only a little over 300 years ago, of an item that's not just handwritten, but hand illustrated, that with so many illustrations, this would be, of course, fairly difficult to do in print. You'd have to secure the engravings or the wood cuts to make such a print edition. So you can see the appeal, the ongoing appeal of a manuscript for something like this, that's so kind of lavish and beautifully illustrated. Bats, roosters, all manner of bird, and even some sort of some mythical species like a double-headed eagle, and then others that are much more identifiable with, of course, actual bird species. And then we transition into insects, which is very interesting. And these diagrams are these illustrations are a little bit harder to see because they're quite small, but they're actually quite charming. These flies, which have little lines under them that maybe show their sort of movement. More birds, and then snakes and insects, then worms. Little diagram illustration illustrating kind of how to catch snakes, how to defend against them, and a lot of interest again in insects and sort of creatures that actually in the Western bestiary tradition are not really shown very often, but then a transition to reptiles and amphibians. a chameleon here, scorpions. And again, the order in which these occur is maybe somewhat surprising to us. And this is obviously a pre-Linnaean, pre-modern categorization of different animals and how they relate to each other. Bees with the beehive, of course, a topic of fascination from antiquity through the early modern period. These other kind of animal societies, bees and ants, how do they function? Are there analogies with how human societies function with a single leader, a queen or a king or what have you? Just really wonderful illustrations. This soon then transitions to different types of plants, which perhaps a little bit less interesting or less striking than the animal depictions. Then we have some areas, some areas that are allocated for illustrations where no illustration has been made. I'm not sure the particular reason behind that, but clearly something to do with the production history of this manuscript. And then we move to sort of fruits and nuts. And of course, by 1710, many of these illustrations can be drawn on print illustrations, on engravings that are circulating pretty widely in a place like Aleppo in this period. So I would say that the plant illustrations are perhaps a little bit less charming or striking to us, but they're very complete. There are many hundreds of them. In fact, more than there are of the animal illustrations. So you get a sort of sense of the sort of biodiversity also of the Eastern Mediterranean world. And this connects to another strength of the collection, which is Herbal's manuscripts that are often in the tradition of Dioscurides, a Greek author who described many of the plants of the Mediterranean world in antiquity and was translated and adapted into various languages. So we have a lot of items that are herbals. This text is more encyclopedic because it has all those descriptions of animals as well. But it fits in well with other parts of our collection that are other herbals in our collection. The rose, of course, very identifiable. And it would be interesting to see if some of these illustrations seem to be derived from prints. So it would be interesting to see if one could match up. The paper, though it has a lot of insect holes, is beautifully polished paper. And then there are a couple of these illustrations, I hope you can see through the camera, have corrections or a patch. So something that happened in the production. There's some insect boreholes, right, that go through multiple pages. I hope you can see those. I can put a piece of paper behind so you can maybe see. Maybe you can't, but there are, the paper has been compromised somewhat. And I think that's what led to this replacement patch, although it looks like it's original. So maybe some of the damage to the paper, had already occurred when the book was being illustrated.
Nick, we have a few questions and I want to be mindful of time.
Sure.
And just give you some time to answer the questions. Thanks to Dahlia for writing translations in the chat. There have been some questions that I've been answering directly, but I think there are a few that might be good for discussion.
Absolutely. So that was the last item I wanted to show. And so we have a few minutes, so that's perfect. And of course, I can well, we can bring an item back out, but of course, we can also refer you to, and I see Lynn's been pasting in the links to the digitized versions, like the catalog record for each of these items.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick. That was a really wonderful introduction to our collection and showed some of my favorite manuscripts. So I very much enjoyed it. So the questions, there's one question. I'm not sure if I'm doing this in the correct order, so just please bear with me. Someone asked, Arif Munander Reswanto wants to know if there's a way to study these manuscripts in terms of something equivalent to a master's or a PhD. And I would say that the library, certainly, we don't have degree programs, but there are certainly opportunities for you to come and do research in person. The visiting research fellowship that I mentioned as a possibility, and also everything is available online so that you can do research from anywhere in the world. I hope that answers that question. I'm happy to discuss it more if not. The next question, Mina Liakne, is there a way to edit some of these manuscripts, and how to do so? Are there manuscripts of religious controversy in the Middle Ages? Nick, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, in terms of editing, I wonder if the person asking the question means, to create a modern edition. I mean, and there are various tools online to do that. I can't think of the names of them off the top of my head, but there are, some sophisticated tools that can help with transcription and making transcription also. Making it a group project where you can have various people working on the transcription of a single manuscript. We have experience with colleagues and scholars who've done that for Latin manuscripts or manuscripts in European languages, but of course it could be done for manuscripts in Arabic or in Persian, and to have a critical edition of a text, but that is online is great, as opposed to having just another printed edition of a critical edition of a text where it's less findable. I mean, there's so many advantages to having an online open edition of a text. So Lynn, I don't know, can you think of any, I mean, I'm thinking of Jeffrey Witt's project where he uses
the ones I'm thinking of are for Latin text, but we could certainly think about, or if anyone actually in the meeting knows, you could just put something in the chat. I'm sure there are. Just not familiar with the ones for Arabic.
But there might be experts in the Islamic Manuscript Association who would have more experience with tools for, I'm assuming, tools for transcribing and then doing modern translation into modern Arabic, perhaps, of some of the text, and then also maybe into English or French or other languages. I think that would be extremely useful, but of course it's a very labor-intensive to do for scholars. So, and then the second question, texts related to religious controversy. I mean, interestingly enough, the Schoenberg collection. I mean, Larry Schoenberg was really not particularly interested, let's say, in religious texts and mysticism and devotion, and so the focus of the collection, the Schoenberg collection, is really on kind of practical knowledge. So in terms of sort of religious texts, we really, of course, many of these manuscripts and many of these texts have a religious dimension and invoke the name of God for various, in various instances, of course. But the focus of the collection here is really practical knowledge. Of course, we have other manuscripts in our collection that are not from the Schoenberg, from Larry Schoenberg. We have Qurans and we have copies of the Hadith and other texts, of course, but religious texts, as we do for Judaism and for Christianity as well as Islam, and those can be found on our catalog and on Open. But in terms of the Schoenberg collection, I would say that there are very few items that are really primarily religious in nature. Would Would you agree, Lynn?
Yeah, yeah, I think our focus is more tends towards the secular. So another question by Hija Chadili. Thanks to everyone for organizing this meeting and for the valuable presentation. I would like to know more information about the Amazigh manuscripts in North Africa and to any historical period. I'm not sure. I know the answer to that question.
I don't know either. I mean, I think the closest thing we showed was that text on weather predictions for crop harvesting, which comes from likely from Morocco or maybe from southern Spain. But I don't know if we have any manuscripts from the further south, from the Sahel or from the sort of Saharan Arabic-speaking world in our collection. Most of our items are. I mean, we have relatively few other items from North Africa or Spain.
Right, and then Rita El Husseini has given us some information about the ownership seal, which is not an ownership seal. So I'll read out the translation. The seal found in the musicology manuscript. The text follows a Quranic verse: "God is the best preserver." The font type is the Thuluth font. Its purpose, a ritualistic measure of book memorization. And he also writes that the word big, I guess the scribe writes the word big is bad. And he says, or Dr. El Husseini says, it is definitely not a seal of ownership because it is inside the pages and not in the back of the manuscript. So that's very valuable information.
Yeah, and fascinating. I mean, something I don't know much about, but the notion of sort of stamping a text as a kind of proof of, a sign of memorization or absorption of the text is very fascinating, and I'd love to hear more about that. If you have more to say by email or by getting in touch with us after the event.
And then Dr. El Husseini writes again, for the geometry book, I think this is the Euclid manuscript, the codicological significance indicates that it is an educational book for a student. The paper size indicates it is a book that evokes a lesson and review more than it is a large engineering book with footnotes or comments. And the engineering drawings are preliminary.
Fascinating.
I don't know if that's a Euclid manuscript or not. I think that's the one on weights and measurements.
The one on weights and measurements. Okay, right.
But thank you for these comments. This is exactly why we're happy to do this kind of visit, because we learn so much.
And absolutely. And I should say that if you have, please go to our the catalog, the Franklin records that Lynn has been posting in the chat. I may have tripped up and made some errors in my descriptions, but those contain the state of our knowledge on these items. And so please look at those if you have specific knowledge and questions, and if you can correct anything or make additions, we do or point us towards publications as well. We can add that to the catalog record and add your name as well. As a source of this information. So please do help us if you can with any additional information you might have.
Great. I think that's the end of the questions. I'm looking in the question and answer and the chat. I don't see anything else. Are there any further questions? Well, thank you again, Nick. Thank you to Dahlia for letting us invite everyone to this virtual visit. And yes, please do, if you have any information or have any questions about how you might get access to our collections, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'll put my email in the chat very quickly. And Nick, maybe you can put yours in.
Sure.
but you can also reach us through the Schoenberg Institute website. All right, well, I think we can end here. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing all of you at some point in the future.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Bye.